Hi, this is Carlos. Thank you for listening to this message. Um, I am going to talk about why I'm voting for Jill Stein for President of the United States in the 2024 election. That's tomorrow. Today's Monday, November 4th. Um, I, I'd like to begin by simply stating the obvious, which is that voting is obviously the right of all Americans. And as citizens of this country, it's a decision that I have to respect. Whatever you decide, whether you're voting for Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, another third-party candidate. It's not my place to condemn or judge anyone for their decisions. However, because politics involves the lives of billions of people, it affects us all in the most fundamental of ways, whether it's how much money we make at our job, whether or not the United States has renewable energy, how it affects the environment, reproductive rights, um, you know, crime, you name it. These are all things that have massive impacts on our lives, and so um, these are things that are worth discussing. And I believe that um, as citizens of a democracy, it is our responsibility to be thoroughly engaged in the political process, to have, uh, you know, be informed and have constructive dialogue, meaningful discussions about the issues and why we're choosing to vote for who we vote for, and why we support the policies that the candidates are behind. And when it comes to, I know there's a cultural norm in the United States that is very, voting is a private matter. You shouldn't talk about it or ask anybody who they voted for. But I reject that. I think that it is, of course, you're right not to disclose who you voted for. But I think you should, in practice, have conversations with both people you agree with and people you disagree with as best you can, because ultimately that is how our democracy, that is how a healthy democracy is supposed to work, is through us getting to the truth, and to understand why we do the things that we do. And the only way to do that, to at least have a greater understanding, is to share the reasons why we're voting for someone and make the case, um, uh, in the same way that the candidates themselves do, but just with each other. So, the first and most important reason for me to vote for Jill Stein is simply because of her position with regard to the genocide in Gaza. Um, I will dive into some of the details of what's happening first, but let me just say that the genocide is, because it's being perpetrated by Israel, the state of Israel, against the Palestinian people residing in Gaza. Um, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris have both taken staunch positions affirming the United States' alliance with Israel and our support for the nation. And I would argue that that support is also in favor of their actions, right? So it's not just a rhetorical statement, it's also a tangible uh, matter of fact that we're supporting, or that Israel is, uh, executing genocide in Gaza, and that the United States is supporting Israel in that process. Um, Kamala Harris has stated numerous times that she believes Israel has a right to defend itself. She thinks that since the terrorist attacks by Hamas on Israeli civilians and military targets, but also civilians, on October 7th, that they have been more or less justified in their military campaign. And she'll say some things like, well, we needed to reach a ceasefire deal as soon as possible. Many people have died. Too many people have died in the conflict, that sort of thing. But um, she has never communicated an explicit policy plan in terms of what she would do to actually make a ceasefire happen. If you look at her website and if you read the comments she's made, it's very clear that she more or less holds the same position that the current president, Joe Biden, has, which is we must support Israel at all costs. They're a moral, I guess, and strategic ally that we must defend no matter what. And um, even if they claim to disagree with the number of people that have died, um, or the some of the individual decisions that Israel has made, the fact of the matter is that the United States continues to fund Israel's military. We always fund Israel's military. We give them billions of dollars every year for their Iron Dome and other military assets. Um, and we this in the past year, since October 7th of last year, we've given them a far larger amount than we ever have. Several times the amount that we would normally give. And so effective. We're also providing military support. We've begun to send troops into the region. We've already intercepted numerous missiles that have come from Hezbollah and Hamas. So our own military is already involved, even though there's been no formal declaration of war by the United States, which is supposed to go through Congress. And so Kamala Harris has basically more or less mirrored the policy of Joe Biden, her as a current vice president and her president. She has stated in no uncertain terms that she supports Israel's right to defend itself, and what that effectively means is that she thinks that Israel is justified in conducting its, what I consider to be a genocide and ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. She might have some qualms, as does Joe Biden, about the methods and how extreme and some of the rhetoric that is coming out of Israeli politicians. But the fact of the matter is that we continue to fund them. Harris has not stated that she will stop funding them. She has not threatened to do any kind of a weapons embargo, meaning us deciding to not send more weapons to them, because we're not just supporting them financially, but we're supporting them militarily. So she hasn't threatened to stop the money, to stop sending Israel money. She hasn't threatened sanctions or what is called boycott, divestment, and sanctions, BDS, which is what I think is more or less the correct position with regard to Israel. She hasn't said any of that. There's no reason to believe that she would be substantially different than President Joe Biden on the issue. She, as vice president, she doesn't have much power. Obviously, the president is the one in charge. However, she does not have to, on the campaign trail, say that she is in favor of Israel, having, being completely in support of Israel's actions and not being very clear that what Israel is doing is genocidal, is heinous, blatant murder of innocent people that is not in any sense justified, no matter what the reason. And I'll dive more into that. She, as vice president, could just choose to recuse herself and say, hey, you know what? I am the vice president. It's not my place to make policy decisions, but because I feel so strongly about this issue, I'm not going to comment on it, or even I'll just comment and say that I'm against what the president's doing, but I won't say anything further. I think if any moral person in that position, that's what they should do. They would say, even though you are the president and I support you on all these other things, I cannot in good conscience support this specific thing. So the excuse that she's vice president, has no power, doesn't mean that she is obligated to take that position. She's a free person. She's not being a public servant doesn't mean being a public slave. Doesn't mean that she has to do what Joe Biden says or support everything that Joe Biden does. Uh, she, at the very least, could, to say, I disagree with the president and I'm not going to be involved or comment further. But she instead has taken an assertive stance of supporting Joe Biden's policies and has stated numerous times in several interviews that she wouldn't do anything different than Joe Biden. She's verbatim stated that she's been asked, what would you do differently than President Joe Biden, uh, during his term? And she said basically nothing. So she has been very clear that she is okay with Joe Biden's policy in the Middle East. And that to me is completely unacceptable. And uh, for that reason, for primarily that reason, I think this is the main reason why I cannot, in good conscience, vote for Kamala Harris. Um, I know some of you might have some level of awareness of what's been happening in the Middle East, what um, the history uh, before October 7th, what's been happening since October 7th of last year. Um, but I think that it's worth. I can't. You can have entire degrees in universities on the subject between the history of Israel and the Palestinian people and the conflicts that have emerged since. But I'm going to do my best to briefly summarize what's been going on for those of you who aren't as aware. Um, in reaction to the terrorist attack by Hamas on October 7th, Israel has taken a policy of collective punishment. Basically, they have bombed the entirety of the Gaza Strip. They have invaded the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip is home to 2.3, I believe, million Palestinians, half of which are children. The numbers that I've seen say that only about 40,000 of them are actually Hamas in total. And that is, most studies say that 90 that their current civilian death rate is 90%. That means that for every 10 people they kill, 9 of them are innocent civilians. We're talking about women, children, men, babies, infants being bombed, slaughtered, burned alive, torn to pieces. And if you don't believe me, see for yourself. We live in the age of social media. It is not hard to find. You can see the, the death and destruction that has been happening. You see videos of mothers holding their dismembered children. There's a famous video of a headless child, of a baby who was decapitated by a missile strike. There are videos of people burning alive. There are videos of every kind of horror imaginable is currently happening in Gaza because of the actions of the Israeli military, first and foremost. And they would not be able to conduct their campaign of, slaughter without the financial, military, and diplomatic support and cover of the United States. Um, the the level of devastation is nothing. It has no precedent, in terms of the existing Israel-Palestine conflict since going back to the creation of Israel. This is the worst it's ever been, and I encourage everyone to educate themselves on this subject. There are countless documentaries, books you can read, articles you can read that summarize, YouTube videos, whatever, podcasts that will tell you the in-depth history of the creation of Israel, what happened to the Palestinians, the Arab Muslims who were there, and what has happened since. And that would take too long to explain, but basically you have a highly advanced power in the form of Israel, that, a developed country that has an extremely strong military. It's very wealthy. It has all kinds of technology, military or otherwise, and it is backed by the world's sole superpower, the United States, the most powerful military in the history of mankind. And so, because of that, they have complete control over what happens in Palestine, in Gaza, I should say. Um, Gaza is an open air prison. The people who live there have no rights. They cannot leave. They are, uh, they're not an independent country. I mean, they should be, but they're not in practice. Um, they were restricted. They have, it's not like there's anywhere that they can go. They can't just like show up in a different country because other countries wouldn't accept them, right? So you can't just show up somewhere and be like, hey, come take me. And it's again, their population extremely restricted in terms of their movement. They they've been subject to a relentless regime of oppression where basically they are living in what is considered apartheid, where they are second class citizens controlled by a government which does not represent them, in this case, the Israeli government. And there's a whole history as to what they've done and how they've done it to resist that or to fight against that. But long story short, Israel has always been oppressing the Palestinians because their nation was founded on taking land that wasn't theirs, where people are already residing. Now, I'm not going to get into like I'll state like an obvious position, which is I don't think the correct thing is to then expel all the um, all the Israelis from the region in reverse, right? There are people who would argue for that are very pro-Palestine. I'm not going to go that far. I think there's already millions of people there, and they've been living there generationally for their whole life. I don't think that's the right way to go about it. But again, this is a conflict that has been going on forever. Well, since after World War II. Um, but what's specifically unique about what's happened since October 7th? October 7th was the worst attack, as far as I know, um, against the Israeli people in their land, and I believe hundreds, almost 1,000 civilians were killed, as well as military bases. It was horrendous. It was awful. It was not these are innocent people who are just going about their lives, just like you and I, who are taken and murdered. And then there was you know over 150 hostages that were taken as well. So this is all to say that it was a horrendous incident, and I believe that Israel is justified in having some kind of response. However, the response that they've done is to punish 2.3 million people, the vast majority of whom are innocent civilians, by completely leveling their entire land. It's a highly densely populated region, again, with people who can't really come in or out. It's very restricted. It's controlled. Israel controls all the borders, even the water. They decide what gets in and what gets out because they're concerned that weapons can be smuggled and that sort of thing. And you know, at this point, some estimates say that at the lowest end, 40,000 innocent civilians have been killed. So the reports from reputable organizations say that it's a 90%, over a 90% civilian death rate. Again, 9 out of 10 people being killed that are innocent civilians, not Hamas, not military, or insurgents, whatever the term is. These are innocent people who have been executed as ostensibly as collateral damage. Though I think that whether it's intentional or not has now begun to whether Israel is intentionally killing them or not, I think is now in question. It used to be that it was, they could at least argue that, oh, well, sorry, we happen to kill innocents in our military endeavors. But at this point, it's become clear that they simply have no regard for the lives of Palestinians. Some of the higher estimates already say that I believe 180,000 people have died. Um, Again, the vast majority of whom are innocent, half of which are children. Um, these are families, these are parents, these are, kids with dreams, these are people just like you and I going about their lives, trying to make the best of the world that they were born into, who, for no reason, for nothing that they did, because it's not like all of those people are either Hamas or in support of Hamas. You know, some people will point to the fact that Hamas won an election that was I wouldn't call it a free and fair election. It happened in like the early 2000s. That was over, almost 20 years ago. And a lot of the people who have been killed weren't even born to vote, much less were too young to vote. So there's no justification for this level of slaughter, of massacre. The arguments that Israel will make are, basically that, well, Hamas hides behind um, human shields. They live among the people, but that's true of any terrorist group. Terrorist groups exist because they don't have a military, and so they are effectively civilians that have taken arms to fight another power, and oftentimes, depending on the context, the means are, they kill themselves, innocent civilians, um, which is why I don't, support Hamas, because they don't just kill, they don't just attack military targets, they attack civilians and kill civilians as well. In any case, I think it's like 50% of the buildings have been damaged or destroyed in the entire region. All the majority of the hospitals, the universities, the schools, the mosques, like it is complete and utter devastation of an entire, a tiny region, but a region full of 2.3 million people. I believe that's more than the population of the city of Chicago that I live in. And the idea that it's okay to kill civilians because they live among suspected terrorists, I think, is insane. A great counter argument that I love, that I hear, that I think is very effective in illustrating this point, is if imagine there was a school shooter uh, who took a bunch of hostages and was killing people inside of a school. Would the police then blow up the school in order to kill the shooter because the shooter presented a threat to everyone outside of the school? No, all of us would agree that that's utter insanity, that we would kill uh, innocent children simply because there was a murderer, a serial killer among them. And that is effectively what Israel is doing in Gaza. They are indiscriminately killing. They say they do things with precision, but the evidence is in the 90% civilian death rate. Um, the fact that half the people have died are children. They're also trying to starve Gaza. They barely let any aid in. Again, these are all things that are well documented, and you can do your own research. If you don't believe me, look it up. There is an abundant body of evidence that clearly demonstrates that Israel is not interested in the lives and the flourishing of the Palestinian people. There is a lot of evidence that the Israeli government, the current government headed by Netanyahu, is interested in expanding their territory. They have also engaged, they have done military action since October 7th in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iran, in Iraq, uh, and I'm not sure if Yemen yet, but already that's insane. Now Hezbollah, which operates out of Lebanon, uh, has been in conflict since October 7th with Israel, but now Israel has decided to invade Lebanon and is conducting strikes on the capital city of Beirut, and a lot of the southern region of Lebanon is now being destroyed. Lebanon is a free and sovereign country. Um, and there's just countless innocent people there as well. The vast majority of them are not Hezbollah or so even supportive of Hezbollah necessarily. And so, when you think about the people who live in going back to Gaza, like people are just going about their lives. They're just, trying to work, feed their kids, you know, ha- make meaning out of their day to day, like the rest of us do, and trying to just exist. They're not, you know, trying to kill Israelis or Jews. They're just innocent people living their lives. That some people among them have chosen to take up arms uh, and kill innocent Israelis doesn't mean that all of them are guilty by simply living in the same area. And so, to me, there is no justification. There is of the actions of Israel. There are a multitude of different options. If you get into the specifics of what the quote unquote peace process or the ceasefire negotiations have been, you have seen that time and time again, Netanyahu and the Israeli government have sabotaged any hopes of reaching a ceasefire, of exchanging the hostages that Hamas currently holds. They're not interested in a ceasefire because Netanyahu wants to continue this war. He is currently under investigation for corruption, but now that he's in war, he is basically able to extend his time as prime minister using this cover of war. And he is personally invested in the continuation of this war since his political future would end with the end of this, if the war were to end, and he would be likely um, tried for crimes both related to the intelligence failure that allowed October 7th to happen, but also for previous crimes of corruption that were already there were ongoing investigations. So um, let me just be clear. There is no justification for the Israeli military policy against the Palestinian people in Gaza. There's no justification. It doesn't matter if Hamas live among them, if Hamas hide behind them in schools or churches or sorry, mosques or hospitals. It does not matter. You don't bomb a hospital full of innocent people to get a few Hamas leaders. Um, Most of the doctors who work at these hospitals, they don't all say, yes, let's hide Hamas here, because we support Hamas. If there happens to be Hamas, which a lot of the times there aren't in these facilities that Israel alleges, these apartment buildings, people's homes that are just blown up, that Israel alleges has, what do you call it, has Hamas terrorists inside, um, you don't get to just bomb the people living there because there might be some Hamas there. That is, I think that is completely morally reprehensible. It is ugly, odious. It is completely disgusting to ever say it's okay to just kill innocents because it's quote unquote war or because there is no other way. There are definitely other ways. There's been numerous opportunities for the Israeli government to reach a ceasefire deal, and they have rejected it at every point because they're not interested in a ceasefire. They are interested in expanding their territorial influence, expanding their territory and their influence in the region. Um, Netanyahu has always dreamt of a war with Iran with the backing of the United States, and he is extremely close to achieving that goal. He has, there's been attacks or, military strikes between the two countries now. Now, again, he's now in Lebanon. He has done things in Syria. So, this is expanding into a wider regional war already, which was the thing that Biden was the most concerned over happening, allegedly. And he said he was going to do everything he could to prevent that, and he has failed to do so. Now let's get back to President Joe Biden. President Joe Biden has been a Zionist his entire life. He's said that proudly. The word Zionist, I think, is a loaded term. So, for the purposes of what I'm saying here today, I'm simply going to say that he has been in favor of the state of Israel and the vast majority, if not all, of the actions the government of Israel has taken um, since October 7th. He's been, very supportive of Israel's actions against Palestine. He has, at best, said rhetorically that he wishes less people would die, or he's had difficult conversations with Netanyahu and that he needs to be more careful and allow for more aid in. But the fact of the matter is that um, he has not used the incredible leverage that the United States has, as previous presidents have done against Israel. Israel, compared to the United States, is a tiny country. It is a much Israel depends on the United States. It's not that the United States depends on Israel. And so the United States can threaten Israel and say, if you don't um, stop your military activities, or if you don't at least specifically stop these specific actions that we find to be grotesque and unnecessary, we will, reduce the funding or cut the funding that we're sending you. We will, stop providing diplomatic cover, because the UN continuously puts resolutions out condemning the genocide of the Palestinians, and the United States always vetoes it because they're in the Security Council. And so the United States acts on Israel's behalf all the time, and this is true for both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. It's just policy for the vast majority of politicians in our federal government. And Biden could, stop vetoing. He could threaten to, cut the military support, and because they've been highly dependent on U.S. military for part of their defense against some of the military strikes that Hezbollah has done, and Iran. So there are no shortage of options that Biden can do, and there's historical precedent. There, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, I think George H.W. Bush, I forget who else. All of them at a certain point have uh, told Israel to pump the brakes and said, you guys have to stop what you're doing right now or our support ends. And Israel every time stopped almost immediately because they know that without the United States, they're a sitting duck in the region. They are hated by their neighbors, I would say for many cases, justified reasons, at least specifically to the government and the government's actions against, the Palestinians and others in the region. And so, they are completely dependent on the United States. And because of the fact that Biden has not exercised his leverage, the United States' leverage against Israel to ensure that the hostilities end, that Israel does not continue to escalate its military actions, does not continue to unprovoked attack other countries, as has been the case with Iran. That he could have used an abundance of tools to stop this. So he clearly, even though occasionally says, "Oh, it's sad that so many people have died," and blah blah blah, he clearly every time says, "I support Israel's right to defend itself." They are, justified in, their actions, and yeah, maybe they went a little bit too far for my taste, but at the end of the day, I'm still going to give them money. I'm still going to give them weapons. I'm still going to give them diplomatic cover. So Biden's actions speak louder than his words. And to me, genocide is a red line. There is no greater crime than genocide. And Biden and the United States is actively complicit and supporting the genocide and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from Gaza that is currently happening in our lifetime right now. And our tax dollars as U.S. citizens are going to the U.S. government and U.S. military, and therefore supporting this endeavor. So the facts are very clear to me. Joe Biden is not serious about what he says about wanting to reach a ceasefire deal. He has not used any of the tools at his disposal, and because if he was, he could have ended this the very maybe not the next day, but like within a few days of Israel reaching the point of complete and utter destruction. He could have said, "All right, that's enough. I'm pulling the plug," just like previous presidents have. Um, and he hasn't done that. So, and the fact that Kamala Harris has said, you know, I wouldn't have done anything differently from Biden. I support Israel. I support what they're doing. They have the right to defend themselves. That's Israel argues that they're defending themselves, even though they're the ones attacking and committing that. They've at the bare minimum have killed 40,000 people. That's 50 times the amount of people that died on October 7th. Or innocent civilians, I should say, that died on October 7th. So 50 times the amount of carnage. And again, I implore you, if you're listening to this, look at the images. Do not look away. Look at what's happening. You need to see for yourself the massacres, the conditions of starvation, of disease. There's no water, there is no food, there's no electricity. People are living in squalor. People get constantly moved. Israel says this is a safe zone. They bomb it anyways. They tell people to move from one place to another. They still bomb and kill people. They have already killed the leaders of Hamas. Both leaders of Hamas have already been killed, and yet they continue the conflict. Even though the head of the snake has been killed, a lot of Hamas has been destroyed. Their military infrastructure, and they have no intention of ending. And if anything, they have the intention of escalating against other countries in the area. I could go on about the genocide in Gaza that Israel is executing against the Palestinian people, and how the United States is complicit, directly responsible, um, because of its support of Israel and its policies. But I think, to wrap this up in terms of, you know, what I'm trying to communicate to whoever's listening to this. Imagine if it was your family that was killed, your innocent family, people who you love, people who you deeply care about, people who mean the entire world to you, and they were killed by an Israeli airstrike because somewhere around there was a suspected Hamas militant. Imagine if it was your mother, your brother, your son, your daughter, your partner, your husband, your wife, whatever, someone you deeply care about, your best friend, people who mean the world to you. What wouldn't you do in retaliation to that? What wouldn't you do? What would be beyond the scope for you if your family was innocently murdered, and maybe not just one of them, but several of them? And if you're stuck there, you there's no way for you to get out, and you basically are being starved to death, or you're dying of diseases like polio, because they don't even let vaccines in. There's no food, there's no water, they're shutting down the electricity. The hospitals are, look up the doctors. Look at the doctors, not just from Palestine, from Gaza, but from all over the world that have come to volunteer to help, and hear their stories. Listen to them tell you about, children with gunshot wounds in their heads. Why would an Israeli sniper, you know, or why would Israeli snipers shoot multiple, countless children in the chest or in the head with sniper bullets? Doctors who've had to, hold on to the brains and guts falling out of, children. Um, if that was your child, what wouldn't you do in retaliation? I think most people know the answer is that they would try to kill whoever tried to kill them. Now, in terms of the practicalities of the conflict and the greater morality of the situation, I don't think it's justified to commit acts of terrorism on, what I describe as innocent civilians, people who, it would be the same logic that Osama bin Laden used against the United States, which was, hey, you guys voted for George W. Bush as your president, um, and therefore you guys are all complicit, and they did 9/11. So it's a very there's a lot of similarities between 9/11 and October 7th, in terms of how the nations responded. But imagine, I don't think it's okay to, to take that logic of like, well, anyone who lives in that country is, they're therefore guilty. So I don't think the Israeli people are all guilty. I certainly think Netanyahu and his administration and the people in positions of power, whether it's government or it's other corporate institutions, whatever it might be, religious institutions who've called, basically have many of them have been very vocal about their intent to ethnically cleanse the region of Palestinian, Arabs, Muslims, and expand, create greater Judea. So that this is all out there. This isn't like it's a very much a colonial imperial expansionist project, in the makings. At least under the current government, it's really taken a turn for the worse. So you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is like these are real people. These are humans with, lives and dreams and hopes and feelings and fears that are being massacred with our money. We pay our taxes. Our taxes go to the government, which includes the military, which includes all the defense contractors that we pay, um, and some of that money is going to murder innocent people in Palestine, and therefore we, to some degree, are responsible. Now, again, does that mean Hamas should come do terrorist attacks in the United States? Of course not, and they've never said that they would, as far as I understand. But that's not the logic I'm trying to get to. What I'm saying is we are all responsible to some degree, and I'm gonna now take a moment to talk a little bit about my voting history, as it'll connect to why I think this matters. I was always a lifelong Democrat growing up. I've always been political since I was young. I was voting for Hillary up until the immersion of Bernie Sanders, in 2015. Uh, the emergence of Bernie Sanders. He basically, um, presented a completely different worldview, a completely different set of policies, a policy platform that I'd never even heard of, that I didn't even know was possible. I had heard that other countries had things a little bit different, but I was, shocked to find out that, there was an American politician, proposing things like, universal health care, Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, a massive, you know, government spending project to, transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy and create all kinds of jobs. And, like all these ideas were revolutionary and they were eye opening, and that's fundamentally changed my politics. Um, so I was a diehard Bernie bro. I'm still a Bernie bro, a brocialist, whatever you want to call it. I am dyed in the wool, still Sanders till the day I die. He's not perfect. He hasn't been perfect on the issue of Israel and Gaza. Other issues I disagree with him, but he's certainly the best living politician, alive today. And Bernie Sanders, he was robbed of his election in 2016 by the let's call it shenanigans of the DNC and the Clinton campaign. And so I was extremely resentful. Hillary Clinton's platform did not, represent really what I was after. But, Donald Trump and the Republican Party are completely unhinged for reasons that I'll briefly touch on a little bit later. Um, and so I plugged my nose, I voted for Hillary, despite all my serious issues with her, which can be its own conversation. In 2020, similar thing. Bernie Sanders is my candidate. He got robbed once again. This time through a different set of mechanisms and actions that, again, there's, if you guys want to learn about this, look it up. There's plenty of, YouTube videos and articles and evidence that will explain to you in detail exactly how, Bernie was robbed of the nomination. How tactics were used that were not just purely like the people's will, but, political strategies that, you know, are clearly designed to push certain candidates and disfavor others. And so, in 2020, I bit the bullet again. I plugged my nose and I voted for Joe Biden despite my serious reservations with him. And his policy platform was even less progressive in many ways. And though, I mean, he has done some good things. But anyways, the I did that both times extremely reluctantly. I was never going to vote for Trump because I fundamentally disagree with the majority of Trump's policies. And I think he's a terrible human being. I think his character, you know, speaks for itself. I'll touch on it just a little bit. But Bernie was the guy that I was really there for. But because it was Biden or Trump, I voted for Biden. And so all these previous elections, I ignored Green Party candidates or just third party candidates in general. Now I know a little bit more of that, and I'll touch on that later, some of the reasons why I'm voting for a third party candidate. But this is all to say that I was willing to vote for someone who I did not want, the quote unquote lesser of two evils, because of because of Trump and because of what the Republicans were offering, which was and continues to be so much worse. However, there are lines. There are things that, you know, the lesser of two evils can be so evil that, I'm not willing to partake in, especially if I don't have to. And for me, this is probably the central thesis of my argument. Because I don't live in a swing state, because I live in the state of Illinois, which is a safe blue state, there is no reason for me or anyone in this state that is listening to this to vote for Kamala Harris, or in any of the safe blue states. So that, New York, California, or the deep red states that have 0% chance that a Democrat would win. And so I cannot vote for Kamala Harris in good conscience because there is a genocide happening in Palestine, which under our watch, which we could stop effectively tomorrow, which we are funding and supporting. I can't, in good genocide to me is the line. There is no greater crime than genocide. There is no greater evil possible on earth than genocide. The eradication of a people, and the horrors that are occurring in war, where people are being mutilated, killed, starving, the worst things that you can imagine on this planet. I can't support that. I can't. It doesn't matter. All the other things don't matter with respect to that issue, especially specifically because I live in Illinois. Now, I'll later get to, what I would do if I was in a swing state. If anyone happens to be listening to this that is in a swing state, that'll apply to you. But the vast majority of the people listening to this, if anyone is listening to this, if I'm being quite honest, are from the state of Illinois, or, because I live in Chicago, or other safe blue states. Your vote is not going to cause Kamala Harris to change, to lose in your state. Already, so many votes have been cast. Today's the day before the election. I wish I would have said this like a month ago, but such is life. It's a day before the election. Many votes have already been cast. I am 99.999% sure that Kamala Harris is going to win Illinois and all in the other safe blue states, the ones like Maryland and Vermont and whatever, those, Washington, like those are states that are not going to go differently, even if a significant portion of the population voted uh, for the Green Party or any other third party. But what I'm imploring to anybody listening is that you do not have to vote for Kamala. I think you should vote. It is our responsibility as citizens of this country, and it's, and practically speaking, it's our society would fall apart and we wouldn't have a democracy if people are not informed, engaged citizens and are not voting. And you can see that to some extent already happening. It is our duty as citizens in this system, in this political system, this governmental system, to vote. So I'm not saying don't vote. What I'm saying is vote third party. Specifically, I'm going to vote for Jill Stein for reasons that I'll get into in a little bit. But I think you should vote for Jill Stein. You should not vote for uh, Kamala, and definitely not vote for Trump. And there are other third-party candidates that I think have similar positions. So Dr. Cornel West, I'm a big fan of. Unfortunately, he does not have ballot access in most states, so he is not. He shares most of the policy positions of Jill Stein. Um, I think the Libertarian candidate has a good stance with respect to Israel and Palestine and the genocide. Um, I'm not libertarian. I disagree with them fundamentally on many things, but they are better on that issue. But the two main candidates, Trump and Kamala, effectively have the same platform, except that Trump's is worse. But both of them are completely in favor of Israel, Israel's actions, I should say, the actions of the government against the Palestinian people. And to me, you can't justify nothing. None of the other issues matter. It doesn't matter if it's reproductive rights. It doesn't matter if it's the environment. If it doesn't matter if it's universal health care, wages, the Supreme Court, democracy. It doesn't matter because nothing is worse than genocide. Nothing. Now, from a practical point of view, because I'm in the state of Illinois, I don't have to vote for Kamala Harris. Neither do you. And I'm imploring to anybody listening to this, do not endorse genocide. By voting for Kamala Harris, even if you're voting for other issues, which are very important, especially with respect to Trump, it doesn't mean that you're not complicit. You are basically endorsing a candidate who has said in no uncertain terms what they're going to do, and you're saying I'm okay with genocide, or these other issues matter to me more than genocide, which I would say get your morals straight. How can anything matter more than genocide? How can anything matter more than the slaughter of innocent children, of families, of mothers, fathers, entire communities, an entire culture, an entire civilization that is being systematically eradicated? This is our Holocaust. We haven't reached the level of calamity of the actual Holocaust yet, but given the way things are going, it's not out of the question that this could end up being something that kills hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And it's just none of the other issues matter in when you live in a state that is going to be blue no matter what. Now, if for some reason there was a legitimate chance that in these blue states that I live in and that whoever is listening to lives in, there was so much upswell of Green Party support that it actually threatened the ability for Kamala Harris to beat Trump in that state and to win a safe blue state, then I would say that things would be different. I would say, okay, because Trump is going to do genocide, but worse, it is truly like pure damage control, harm reduction in that scenario. Um, it's just say like less people will die. Both people are going to die the way. Let's just kill less. Um, but it's not going to happen in Illinois. It's not going to happen in California. It's not going to happen in New York or wherever else people who are in safe blue states are listening. We have a stupid system with the Electoral College where truly the votes that matter are in the swing states. It is an antiquated system. It is completely undemocratic. I detest it. I think it's one of the worst things about this country. If it wasn't for the system, Donald Trump wouldn't have been president either time, I believe. Or yeah, Hillary, yeah, both of them. Clinton and Biden won the popular vote. George W. Bush would have lost to Al Gore, et cetera, et cetera. It's an awful system. It is not, it should be one person, one vote. That's plain and simple. It should be this game that we play every year where there's like states and certain states matter more and certain states don't matter at all. And so, but the fact of the matter is, the people listening to this, the vast majority of you live in a safe state. Your state is going to be blue. But I'm telling you specifically, you, this individual, this one person listening to this, to not vote for Kamala and to vote for Jill Stein or another one of the third party candidates who is against the genocide. Kamala's going to win your state. Your one vote is not going to be the vote that makes a difference. And I'm asking you, can you, in good conscience, accept being complicit? Because I voted for Joe Biden. And at the time, October 7th hadn't happened, obviously. But now I feel partly responsible for what's happening in the Middle East. Now, I never wanted this to happen. I had Biden had never made it clear that he would be this extremely pro Israel. At least I hadn't taken that into consideration when I was making that decision to vote for Biden. But now we know. Now he has done what he has done. He has supported Israel in its current and ongoing genocide of the Palestinians. And I should say, for those of you who think that the word genocide is like an extreme word or something like that, the UN's International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Netanyahu and for I don't know if it's Yoav Gallant, other members of the Israeli leadership in the government. And the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, has said that there's a plausible case for genocide. So most countries globally don't seem to take issue with that definition. It's the United States that is extremely often its own like territory with the way it describes the quote unquote conflict that's happening in Israel and Palestine. And so, I didn't know that at the time, but I voted for him. And so now I'm making a decision to rescind my vote for him, for his vice president, Kamala Harris, and for the Democratic Party. I've never been a partisan, but because the Democrats I agree with more than the Republicans, I almost always vote for the Democrats. I don't like the two-party system. I don't like either party. I think the Republicans just happen to be far worse on the issues. I agree with them on a handful of things that I don't agree with the Democrats, but I mostly agree with the Democrats more so than the Republicans. But I also disagree with the Democrats on quite a bit of things with both of them that neither party agrees with. Now, the central thesis here that I'm telling you is that you don't have to vote for Kamala in this state, nor should you. You should not tacitly endorse these actions or say that, yeah, that sucks that all these people are being killed, but I have other issues that I care about. I'm not saying the issues you care about are not extremely important. I care about a lot of the same issues. In fact, we probably agree on the vast majority of issues if you're listening to this, but it doesn't, like, nothing can outdo genocide. Nothing can, the analogy that I like to make is like, let's say Hitler or Mussolini or some Pol Pot, name your evil dictator in the world. And let's say they were great on, healthcare and, reproductive rights and the environment and immigration and all of these things, but they were doing the Holocaust. Would all of those other things make up for the fact that they were doing the Holocaust? Would any of that make a difference? It's like saying, yeah, it's really shitty that Hitler, is putting the Jews in the concentration camps and the death camps and putting them in gas chambers and executing them. But, he's got a great economic policy. I'm really excited about the minimum wage increase and the, renewable energy, whatever it is, right? It's an absurd position. It's an absurd position to take. It's a morally bankrupt position to take. Again, if you live in a safe blue state, you do not have to vote for Kamala Harris. She is going to win your state. And the reason you should vote for a third party is to tell the Democratic Party, to tell Kamala Harris and Joe Biden that what they are doing is unacceptable. What they are doing is morally reprehensible. It is abhorrent. It is beyond uh, beyond uh, forgiveness. It is some you can't. The people listening to this message and the people who are voting Green Party or third party, which I suspect will be more than previous elections. It's ultimately not going to be the factor that tilts the election if in these safe blue states. Now, I do need to make the important caveat as to why um, I would vote for Kamala Harris if I lived in the swing states. The swing states, off the top of my head, are Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, and Nevada. I think there's a couple other states that are too close for comfort that I would throw in there. So one of them would be Iowa. Another one would be Kansas, New Hampshire, and I think that's about it. I'm actually looking it up right now, but those are the states that are within 5% um, for either Trump or Harris. So in those states, I do think that it is the morally superior position to vote for Kamala Harris to prevent a Trump presidency, because those are the states that will determine the election. Um, the reason being is that Trump has promised to do everything that Biden has done except worse. He has said that Biden is too pro-Palestine and that he would make it so that Netanyahu can finish the job. He has never expressed any kind of resentment or complaint about the number of civilian deaths in Palestine. If anything, he did something incredibly um, provocative during his presidency, where he moved the Israeli embassy to Jerusalem. His biggest donors are the Adelsons. They're Jewish, and they have given them, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars. I forget the exact figure, but it's an enormous amount of money. And they've said that they want to. They are giving him the money on the pretense that he'll allow Israel to expand into the West Bank, which is another part of Palestine, which they're already doing, but saying that just give them full carte blanche to take that region and do genocide and ethnic cleansing there. So Trump has been very clear that he is even more in favor of less restrictions against the you know to protect the Palestinian people. He basically says Netanyahu can and should, use all force necessary to achieve whatever goals that he has. Human rights, uh, civilian lives, human life be damned. And so on this issue, Trump is already worse. So if we were just voting entirely just on the issue of Palestine, then it's still better to vote for Kamala, because they at least have rhetorically say that they're in favor of ceasefire. They have made some effort, even if it's the most minimal, pathetic, effort possible. But it's better than absolutely nothing. In fact, trying to make things objectively worse. So I think that that's in the swing states. Just on that issue alone, if this was your defining issue, you should vote for Harris, because more people will die, more Palestinians will die, more people in the region, more Lebanese, more Syrians, more Iranians. With Netanyahu wants Trump to win because he knows that he can drag the United States into a war with Iran. He's really trying his best right now to do that. And we're extremely lucky that we haven't been we're not technically in a war with Iran yet. We're extremely close. Iran is a much more powerful country than Iraq, and we all know how bad the decades-long war in Iraq was for this country and for the people in the region. So this is, this would be significantly worse, and Trump would more or less just allow that to happen, because that's what he says. Like, you, again, don't believe me? Look it up. See where he stands on the issue of Israel and Palestine. He clearly is worse than Biden or Harris. So obviously, the other issues outside of this one still matter. And in my opinion, Kamala Harris is far superior to Trump. Uh, you know, Trump is extremely pro deregulation, extremely pro tax cuts for the wealthy. He thinks climate change and global warming is a hoax. He thinks we should drill more oil. Now he's I mean, anyone listening to this is probably not going to vote for Trump either way. But let me just very briefly go over some of the things that he's done. He obviously did January 6th, where he encouraged and incited a mob to invade the Capitol and commit the only coup or attempted coup that this country has ever seen. Um, and the only time like even in the Civil War, they didn't break into Congress. Um, he tried to steal the election. He used all legal and illegal means to try to make it so that he would remain in power as president. He has his dictatorial tendencies. He constantly praises dictators. He says, he wishes things were more like that here. Um, he's deeply corrupt. He takes money for his own businesses and knows and affairs from countless countries, Saudi Arabia and Israel being two of the biggest ones. Um, and so he is an incompetent buffoon. He is, someone who is a TV reality celebrity. He has no place being in public office. He is a rabid misogynist. He is, a racist. His immigration policy is absolutely terrible. He wants to deport the millions of undocumented people, undocumented Americans living in this country. Um, he, there are so many things that make Donald Trump, not just the Republican Party already is terrible, but they make him uniquely terrible. Really an aberration. And he has no respect for the democratic process. He's not somebody who believes in democracy, and so he is a threat to this nation, to this republic. And the fact that he's not already behind bars is pretty shocking to me. Um, he would nominate people for the Supreme Court. It's already a 6-3 majority conservative court, which is why Roe v. Wade and many other important decisions were either overturned or decided, but in a way that I disagree with. Um, so he's really, he really, I can't understate how terrible a Trump presidency would be for the United States. I'm not even sure if this country would survive another 4 years of him, because he now is much more organized. He claims to not be involved with Project 2025, but the people who support him certainly are, and are very ready to do some of the most radical, things, whether it's like getting rid of entire departments, cutting Social Security, cutting, Medicare. It would be mayhem, absolute mayhem. Harris, I think she is better on a lot of policies. She has at least stated that she is interested taking action to address the housing crisis, the home affordability crisis, that, it's becoming incredibly difficult to buy a home and live a middle class life, to um, policy action for you know uh, paid family leave, child care, more support for families, um, and I could go on. Like, there's a lot of things that I think she does good. I think she also is terrible in certain things and not great in others. Her immigration policy is not great. The fact that she's completely abandoned Medicare for all is not great. That's terrible. Um, but she's probably going to be worse on Biden on some things. I'm particularly worried in terms of antitrust and regulation and just controlling the incredible power that corporations have reached in this country. But she might be better on other issues, that he's not. So it's really hard to say. But overall, she is much better. Now, something I'll say about Kamala, which is true for Trump in a funny way. Kamala's an empty suit. She's an empty vessel. She is a careerist, ambition-driven person. She has changed countless policies of hers. Like Medicare for All is a great example. She was in favor of Medicare for All. Now she's just in favor of expanding, quote unquote, the Affordable Care Act, whatever that means. That's slightly better, but again, why don't we have universal health care in this country? We could totally afford it. It's not. It's there's so many things that she has changed her positions on. She used to be against fracking. Now she's for fracking because it's big in Pennsylvania, a state she needs to win. So she's always been. There's a reason why she was a historically unpopular vice president and did so poorly in the 2020 Democratic primary and was basically did barely got anywhere. She dropped out very early. I think she lost in her home state of California by a significant margin. Like she wasn't even in like the top two. So Kamala Harris is not a good candidate. She's not a good politician. Um, but again, when you're facing Trump, it's we're talking about a completely deranged person. Trump only cares about himself. He only cares about avoiding at this point prison because he has a million cases against him. I think it's like 80 cases are still ongoing, criminal and civil and otherwise. He is very likely, to be convicted of crimes, and I don't know if you'll see jail time at this stage of his life. And given the political and social ramifications, jailing a former president that is still popular among tens of millions of Americans would have. But he knows that if he's in the White House, he's immune. Basically, he is the president. He can pardon himself. He is the most powerful man in the world, and so there is basically a lot. There's so much he could do to keep himself from ever being convicted. And so I don't think there's any question that Trump is far worse. I don't want to. There's no false equivalence here. People need to understand that Trump is an existential threat to our democracy, to this republic. He has no regard for the rule of law. The law is whatever he wants it to be, and he applies it in a completely arbitrary manner. And I think that again, it would be total devastation for the U.S. and the world. Having said all that, because I live in a safe blue state, because the people listening to this are more than likely in a safe blue state or in a deep red state, there's no reason to vote for Kamala Harris if you're listening to this. You're not, you and the three other people who listen to this are not going to make the difference that decides this election. And so let me just briefly say why I'm in favor of Jill Stein. Now, actually, before I even get into her, I should mention the Democratic primary. The Democratic primary in this year was absolutely rigged against any non not Biden. We're supposed to have a primary every year, every 4 years. It doesn't matter if there's an incumbent. You should have a democratic process in case the incumbent is unpopular, which Biden was. He is an extremely unpopular president. He is clearly in severe cognitive decline. He would have lost to Trump by a landslide. He was a terrible candidate. He's not fit for public office at this point. He should be on a beach somewhere, sipping a martini and just enjoying the last couple of days he has, because he's if you've paid attention to politics, this man is not all there mentally, and even people within the Democratic Party have made that claim, which is why he was forced out. And Kamala Harris became the nominee. But prior to that, there was a bunch of candidates who made the argument. Shout outs to Marianne Williamson. At the time, RFK has gone to endorse Trump, which is shameful. But Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and Dean Phillips. These are candidates who they all differed on where they stood, but they were running in the Democratic primary against Biden and saying he is not a good candidate. Also, we just don't agree with him. He's, terrible, obviously, on the issue of Palestine and Israel, but also, Bernie Sanders is you know, my candidate. He reflects the political platform and vision for the future that I believe would make this country prosperous, make the people in this country happy, more fulfilled, live more, rich and meaningful lives. There's so many people in this country suffer so much for unnecessary reasons because of this incredibly vile system of capitalism that we've put together and how our economy works and how our politics works. Bernie Sanders, his vision is to this day what I believe in. And Marianne Williamson, I voted for her in the Democratic primary. She took on that mantle. Um, but now Jill Stein basically has more or less a lot of the same positions. I'm not going to pretend that I know every single one off the top of my head, but I'm fairly familiar with where she stands. You can just read her website, People's Economy. We need an economy that works for working people, Economic Bill of Rights. Uh, that's, I think, borrowing language from FDR, the former president. Um, I think Marianne Williamson did that as well. So again, I'm just reading this straight from our website. Abolish all student debt for 43 million encumbered Americans. I am one of them. I owe tens of thousands of dollars. I'm 33 years old. Um, Lifelong free public education, including trade schools, pre-K through college and graduate school. If you think that's crazy, that is the norm in many European countries where you don't pay for college. It is just paid through your taxes. um, Equalize public school funding and the privatization of public schools, guarantee free childcare, um, reduce taxes on incomes below the real median income of 75,000 per household, strengthen Social Security, uh, you know, on and on and on. That's just her economic stuff. She's got a whole policy platform on labor. She's extremely pro-union, which is one of the few things that the average person has. Like the average worker has to serve as a buffer against the complete corporate domination of this country and not the irreparable, but the incredible damage that they've done in the last 40 to 50 years. Basically stealing from workers, reducing their quality of life, and making themselves, the people who are wealthy in this country even more wealthy. When it comes to labor, she talks about passing a guaranteed livable income above poverty, which is another word for universal basic income. Some form of rent control, federal support for worker-owned cooperatives. I think that's extremely important. I think worker-owned cooperatives are another, on top of unions, important way to, that's one of the core like socialist policies that I think are actually very good. It's not to say that all businesses need to be worker-owned cooperatives, but we certainly could use a lot more, and it'd be a lot better for workers and for our society. Um, Expand and defend workers' right to unionize to include domestic, agricultural, and so-called gig workers. Repeal the Taft-Hartley Act and end the right to work for less laws. Ensure worker representation on corporate boards at 50%. That's something that, if I'm not mistaken, is the standard in Germany and definitely the case in other countries. So look, these are just the first two issues. I'm not going to read the entire website. You can do that for yourself. JillStein2024.com. There's a whole platform on healthcare, universal healthcare, housing. We have record high homelessness crisis. Housing costs have gone through the roof, and she has a plan for taking care of that. Protecting our democracy. Getting money out of politics. Um, Prison reform, police reform, social justice, immigration, Green New Deal. It's, and then obviously her foreign policy is the key selling point given the situation in Palestine. So Jill Stein, look, is she a perfect person? No. Is she, is the Green Party a perfect party? No. I don't think they've made a lot of mistakes. I think that um, they're not perfect. It's not. I'm not saying they're perfect, but she's certainly far better than Kamala Harris on policy. And this is the way all Americans should vote. You should vote for the candidate which represents your policies, your views. It's that simple. Vote for the candidate who is running on the policies that you believe in. It shouldn't be, oh, who you think is going to win or who you think has a chance or is actually viable. That is the reason why we're in this situation, because everyone's playing this game of trying to guess who's actually going to win instead of just voting. If all of us voted for the candidates, not just in the presidential, but like in all of the races that just represented the views of the people, we'd be in a much better place. But instead, we play these games in part because of the electoral college and yada yada, at least for the presidential. But you should just vote for the candidate, look at the policies and say, oh, this person represents me. And these people represent me less or don't represent me at all. You can, I guess, take character into account, like that's obviously a factor as well. But it should, at the end of the day, these people aren't your friends. These people are government officials. They're politicians. Their job is to pass and execute laws and run the government. Like it's not. It should just be about what they're after, and then I guess how good they are at actually, getting done what they say they're going to try to get done. Unfortunately, we don't have people are voting for all kinds of other reasons. Just vote for the candidate who represents your views. Jill Stein represents my views much more than any other candidate. You could make the argument I'm also voting for her over Cornel West because of the fact that Cornel West isn't even on the ballot in many states. So Jill Stein's not on the ballot in Illinois, but you can write her in, which is what I'm going to do. Cornel West, you could do the same, but Jill Stein is just ostensibly, they both are very, very similar. And so because Jill Stein is slightly better on is not slightly better on policy, is slightly more realistic because she has party infrastructure and more ballot access. Since I see them as, both being equal policy wise, then I can make a decision about who has a better chance of winning in the system or whatever. But that's after I've determined that they're both more or less the same in terms of the policies that I care about. And for the record, I don't agree with everything that Jill Stein has. I'm probably significantly more conservative on a handful of issues, maybe to the left on another handful. I have a very unique way of seeing the world and my own political perspective. And so, this is all to say that she's not a perfect candidate. The Green Party is not perfect. But at the end of the day, she's far better than Kamala Harris is. And if you live in a safe blue state, you should vote for Jill Stein or a third party. Now, if we ever get to the point where the third party movement, or the third parties in general, are such serious contenders that they could actually tilt the election in some kind of meaningful way outside of the swing states, then I think it's a different conversation. So in the swing states, again, I'm making the argument that you shouldn't vote for third party. You should vote for Kamala Harris because it's going to be her or Trump either way. It's not going to be Jill Stein has no chance of winning. Neither do any of the other third party candidates. It's going to be either Trump or Kamala tomorrow. And so you should vote for Kamala in those swing states because she is going to lead to less death, even if it's still a genocide. It's, every life counts. I would rather have less people die. And if you don't vote or vote for third party in that state, you are increasing the chances of Trump becoming president and killing even more people, not even getting into the fact that he would destroy this country, potentially end whatever is left of our democracy, and make lives for people here completely miserable and ruinous. And look, I in the past voted for the Democratic Party, and I now kind of regret it because I just simply didn't. The simple conclusion that I've come to, which is really the main central argument, is that I don't have to vote for Democrats in this state. And I shouldn't if they don't represent my views. I should have looked at the Green Party and other candidates in 2020 and in 2016. The fact is that I didn't. I simply, because even as somebody who is very politically informed relative to the average person as I am, I did not pay enough attention to third parties because I thought they weren't serious. I thought they were irrelevant, whatever it might be. But that's silly. If they're, Jill Stein was running in 2016, Howie Hawkins was in 2020. They more almost certainly represent my views more. And so if I was to be in 2016 or 2020, I would have voted third party now. What it has changed is the fact that I've just come to this very simple realization that I don't need to vote for the Democrats in a safe blue state. And I think that, so while people say, well, what's the difference if I vote for one or the other? It's like you're sending a message. You're saying to the Democratic Party, there are many people who would rather vote for a third party that cannot win because of the policies that party is running on and the policy versus the policies you're running on. And you could get those people if you changed your policies, if you were better on the issues. And so the fact of the matter is that the more people that are in favor of the policy platform that Jill Stein represents, which is very similar to the one that Bernie Sanders represented, the more people who are in favor of that, the better this country will be. And so, and look, even if you don't agree with me on the policies and you think Bernie Sanders sucks or whatever, I know a lot of people who say the two-party system is a terrible system, and it truly is. It creates all kinds of problems in terms of extremism, in terms of just basically like it's these two private institutions that they're totally bought and owned by corporations of different kinds and moneyed interests and wealthy people, wealthy donors, and so they are only they only answer to them. They're only accountable to them, and not to the voters necessarily. And so if you hate the two-party system, which I know a lot of people do, vote for third party for that reason. So I would have changed my votes. I would have voted for Jill Stein and Howie Hawkins 2016, 2020. Now that I know that it really doesn't matter. As I was saying, if we got to a point where the third parties now are at potentially taking safe blue states and turning them into toss-ups or whatever, that's a different conversation. We're not anywhere near that. So the day that Illinois becomes a swing state or something because the third parties in the state have become so popular, that'll be a different conversation. But maybe at that point, if we've reached that point, then the third party could actually win the election, which would be amazing to end this corporate duopoly. And most people, like, the reason Trump was popular in 2016 is because he talked about draining the swamp. That was great. That was a great message, except that he just is part of the swamp as well. He's a rich, elite, out of touch asshole who is just a total narcissist. And, he's a part of the same club. He was friends with Hillary and Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein and whoever the fuck you hate. He's all the same. I don't know why people think he's different. He's literally he just says that he hates the elites, but he's an elite himself. So it's like, what are you talking about? Look, I think one thing I'll end on is I think, especially from my liberal friends that are voting for Kamala, because of climate or reproductive rights or democracy or you name it, right? The guns, whatever the issue might be. I know a lot of you guys believe in the adage of listening to marginalized voices, listening to the people who are affected by the issue, not listening to the people who are not affected by the issue or the just majoritarian voices. Right now, Jill Stein is incredibly popular amongst Arabs and Muslims and Palestinians. I forget the recent polling, but I think if I'm not mistaken, she was outright winning a majority in Michigan among that population. Go ask a Palestinian, someone who's more than likely had lost family already. Go ask someone who's Muslim or of Muslim descent. Go ask someone who's Arab. Ask them who they're voting for and why. And if you're able to tell them, look them in the eye and say, hey, you know what? Even though I don't have to vote for Kamala Harris, it's not going to make a lick of difference. And even though she is complicit and is likely to continue, is very likely to continue Joe Biden's policy in that region of genocide, and even though you, my Palestinian Muslim Arab friend, whoever, whatever, have lost family members and the countries of origin that you come from or descend from are being devastated. I'm still, despite knowing that and not having to, I'm still going to vote for that person. Ask them what they think and how they would feel if you did that, if you have somebody like that in your life. Now, I should be fair, not all of them think the same way. There are Muslims and Arabs and Palestinians who are going to vote for Kamala Harris. Some are going to vote for Trump. Some are not going to vote at all. But from what I've seen, the majority from those communities is either they're voting third party or they're not voting at all. Both Trump and Kamala Harris are untenable, and they have every reason to. And look, I'll wrap things up by saying that, something that I've always hated about Democratic politics, and this is true for Republicans as well, but as someone who is more on the left than I am on the right by a significant amount, it's the cult of celebrity around, like Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and I guess not so much Joe Biden at this point, but like Kamala Harris. These people are not your friends. These are politicians, and part of what they do is they're very good at convincing you that they're like you and that they are there for you. Obama, who I think did some good things, same as Joe Biden. Joe Biden has done some good things as well as president. Prior to October 7th, I might have even voted for him because he did some good things if he was still the nominee. But Obama was responsible for a drone war in Afghanistan, Iraq, and I forget where else. But he got into Libya, he got into Syria. He also had a 90% civilian death rate, as did Trump and Bush as well. So it's not just him, but I'm picking him out specifically because the people who are enamored with the Obamas, Michelle Obama, Barack Obama, there's this whole like cult around them and how amazing they are. Obama was the commander in chief of this country, and he was okay with doing these drone strikes and doing the military actions that he did in the Middle East, killing countless civilians. I think in the war in Iraq alone, just Iraq, 500,000 people ended up dying. Civilians, Iraqi civilians. That's not including soldiers, American soldiers that died. 500,000 people. Really think about how many people that is were killed. Now, that's not entirely to blame for Obama, but the fact is that he didn't get us out of Iraq. He didn't, and he has to be the one. He is, at the end of the day, the one who is green lighting every military action. Now, I don't think he specifically knows or is making decisions on every specific military action. Of course, he couldn't have that, but he puts generals and defense personnel who he supports and agrees with, because he's the one that chooses them, and they're the ones who, with his permission and knowledge, make these decisions. The drone war, 90% civilian death rate, countless innocent people who just couldn't even look up at the sky on a sunny day because they were scared that a bomb might fall on them. Countless people killed. I can't look at the guy and be like, yeah, he's chill, yeah, he's cool, yeah, wow, he did some good things, and he's not a terrible human being like Donald Trump is, or a lot of the Republicans are. He's a murderer. He's a war criminal. So is Trump. So is Biden. So is George W. Bush. So is most of the U.S. presidents since World War II. I think that's the Noam Chomsky quote that, if we applied the... Actually, fuck it. I'll just pull it up right now. If the Nuremberg laws were applied, then every post-war American president would have been hanged. By violation of the Nuremberg laws, I mean the same kind of crimes for which people were hanged in Nuremberg. For those of you who don't know, that's talking about the Nazi generals and political leaders that were hanged for the Holocaust. Now, I don't think that US presidents are on that level, but since 1945, the worst thing about this country has been its foreign policy. I'm from Colombia, from South America. Go read some books about what the United States has done in Latin America and elsewhere in the world. So Obama was a massive disappointment in many ways. He did do some good things, but he also failed miserably in a lot of things. And I hate the partisanship. I hate the cult and the culture that worships him as if he's some kind of saint when he was just another politician. And the reason I'm picking on Obama is because among the people that I associate with, living in Chicago in a liberal city with people for the most part with college degrees, there's this like aura of, wow, wasn't he great? And it's like, he wasn't terrible, but he wasn't great. And he did a lot of awful things that he, as the other presidents, should be prosecuted for and face justice. And Kamala Harris is no different. Kamala Harris is going to do, she's already done a lot of awful things. Go read about her record as a district attorney in California. She also has done some good things. She isn't a perfect person. Nobody is, especially not politicians. They're some of the worst. But there shouldn't be this cult of person. We shouldn't treat politicians as celebrities, as these gods and idols, as the way we treat Hollywood types. These are people that are public servants, and we should only support them insofar that we are aligned with them on our actually policy positions, on the issues we care about. And Kamala Harris is likely to continue the same policy that Joe Biden has done with regard to Israel. And I'm already deeply saddened at the people who seem to just turn another eye and say, yeah, well, what are you going to do? World's a tough place. Tough luck to the tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians that have died, and then the tens of thousands more that will die, if she's elected. And they would definitely die if Trump was elected. But, I don't associate people like Trump for the most part. And I think Trump is far worse, and most Republican politicians are far worse. But what I'm trying to say is that the Democratic Party is not your friend, or the Democratic politicians, almost all of them. There are some exceptions. And we do need a fundamental change in this country. If there was ever a time for a third party revival, I think it would be now.